Do you struggle to put them on a hand at the poker table? Today I'm going to give you 9 easy clues you can use next time you're playing poker to tell if they have it or not. Use these 9 simple tips to read their poker hand. This works whether you play live in the casino or online poker games. Let's jump into it. Counting down from 9 to 1, here we go. Alright guys, so starting at number 9 is check raising a rag flop. Now guys, this is a common tell of amateur poker players in particular. And by the way, a tell in poker is just when you're giving off some sort of physical clue or a betting clue or a timing clue. We're going to talk about that later, that gives away the strength of your hand. So let's talk about a rag flop. The flop is the 3 cards in the middle, the community cards you're probably familiar with. Never fall for this ridiculous tell that amateur poker players give off. So you raise it up with ace king, ace of hearts, and king of clubs, and a rec player calls you. Now rec players are also called our fishy friends. That is absolutely crucial to this hand, and the reason why is because we know that these players are playing all sorts of junky hands, and so we absolutely need to keep that in mind when we go to the flop. So let's go to the flop now, which is the jack of diamonds, 5 of spades, and 3 of hearts. You make a bet, they raise. What on earth is going on here? Well guys, first things first, if you've watched any of my other videos on this channel, you know that this is a standard play for me to bet this flop versus one player. We have ace king, which is the nut no pair, meaning that it is the best non-paired hand currently possible. So for example, if they have a hand like ace 10 or king 9, those are unpaired hands as well, and we are significantly ahead of those hands. In terms of numbers, we are 70 or 80% to win versus those hands, a very, very strong advantage. So guys, I'm going to tell you straight up that this is an easy call for me for the simple reason that they are representing almost nothing on this board. All right guys, so on the jack 5-3, there are almost no draws on this board. First thing you should always notice is that this is a rainbow flop, and when I say rainbow, that means there are 3 different suits, so there is no possible flush draw on this board. You guys might have also noticed that there are no conceivable straight draws on this board. There is only 1 high card with the jack. So guys, recreational players all the time flip out on boards like this. We're actually going to talk about the fish on tilt later on. That's coming up later in the video, but guys, they love to flip out here all the time with total junk. Maybe they have an ace deuce here, a king 9, they're just on tilt, and sometimes they might just be doing it with some sort of mediocre hand like a pocket 6s for something to do, and we're going to talk about how to move them off that hand coming up later in the video as well. But guys, bottom line here, with a hand as strong as ace king in this situation, I'm just going to call them here, and we're going to go to the turn and we're going to play some poker, and specifically I'm going to try to move them off their hand later on. All right, so moving on to tip number 8 now to tell if they have it or not, and that is big talker equals weak hand. So guys, this is a classic tell of acting strong when you're weak. A lot of people these days have watched way too many Phil Hellmuth videos on the internet, maybe here on YouTube, and we've all seen him given the speech. I'm going to talk about that a bit later as well, trying to act all big and tough at the poker table when really all they're doing inside is praying that you fold your hand. Guys, do not fall for this classic tell. And by the way, the opposite also applies, especially somebody who is relatively talkative at the poker table. All of a sudden they zip it, all of a sudden they're quiet, maybe the hands are a little bit shaky. This often represents a strong hand. So guys, look for these classic common physical tells. And by the way, this also applies in online poker. The chat box can give you a lot of clues. When somebody starts talking a lot, often they don't have too much. But let's move on to tip number 7 now to tell if they have it or not, and let's talk about the special case now of the nits or rocks. So guys, nits and rocks are simply different. These are the tightest players at the poker table. I've talked about these player types in many videos here on the channel. These are the players who are sitting around folding nearly everything, waiting for their pocket aces, their pocket kings, waiting to hit a flush so they can raise you up. Guys, do not fall for this stuff. When the tightest player raises you, especially on the turn or river, which are what I call the big money streets in poker, believe me, they have it greater than 90% of the time. Let me give you an example. You've got pocket cowboys, pocket kings, second best hand in the game. You got the king of diamonds, king of clubs, and by the turn, the board reads the queen of hearts, jack of spades, 8 of hearts, and jack of diamonds. So guys, first things first, I hope you notice that this is a much more dangerous board for our hand. First off, there are multiple straight draw possibilities. A hand like 9-10 actually flopped the straight here. A hand like Queen Jack actually has a full house here on the turn. If they've got any jack in their hand, they've got trips by the turn. There's also a flush draw on the board with 2 hearts, which we do not block because we do not have the king of hearts in our hand. And the final drum roll kicker here, yeah, we're up against the tightest player at the table. So when you bet on the turn here, guys, and they raise you, please just lay your hand down. I know it's painful. I know you've got pocket kings, but guys, trust me, they've got a straight. They've got trips. They've got some sort of monster hand. Maybe they got pocket eights. That's also a full house on this board. Guys, bottom line, when the tightest player at the table raises you on the turn or river, they're not bluffing you. Just fold your 1 pair hand and thank me later. All right, guys, moving on to tip number 6 now to tell if they have it or not. And let's talk about pre-flop 3-bet percentage now. And straight up, I'm going to tell you, if it is 5% or less, look out. This is the kind of player that is not bluffing you, and it's typically nits and rocks, by the way, who have a 3-bet percentage of 5 or less. So let me break this down first for you. What is a 3-bet? Well, a 3-bet before the flop in poker is when you raise and then they re-raise you. This is a very strong play in poker, often representing a very strong hand. And when somebody is only 3-betting less than 5% of the time, that means they're often doing it with hands like pocket aces, pocket kings, ace king, pocket queens, and so on. I think you guys get the idea. Some of the strongest hands possible. So how do you get this number? First off, well, if you use a HUD online, which stands for heads up display, these are numbers that you can get on your online poker table. You can just check that and see it for yourself. If you want to know the HUD that I have used for over a decade as a professional, I will link that up in the description below. But guys, even if you play live poker or you play online poker without using a HUD, you simply want to look for the players who are almost never raising before the flop. Once again, this is almost always nits or rocks. When they finally re-raise you, you need to respect this. It is almost always an extremely strong hand. All right, guys, moving on to number 5. Something's fishy. Let's talk about the story doesn't make any sense. All right, guys, so by the river, all the draws have missed, and the amateur either bets big or raises you big. I'm going to tell you that this is a bluff greater than 80% of the time. Let me give you an example. Once again, you got pocket jacks, jack of hearts, jack of clubs, and by the river, the board reads the 8 of hearts, 2 of spades, 7 of hearts, 3 of diamonds, and 10 of clubs. So in this situation, you bet on the river, they raise. What on earth is going on? Well, guys, I'm going to tell you that I'm going to be calling here the vast majority of the time, because on this board, let's talk about all the draws that have missed here. Well, first things first, the obvious one is the heart flush draw has missed by the river, and also crucially, all of the straight draws have missed. For example, a hand like 9-10 did not hit it straight. A hand like 6-5 did not hit the straight, and that lovely little 10 of clubs on the river is actually really interesting, because if they had a hand like 10-9, obviously they have top pair now, and they're very likely to think their hand is good, but we're going to flip over the bad news with our pocket jacks, which of course is a better hand. So guys, for all of these reasons, on boards like this where all of the draws have missed, and maybe you think they've made a pretty good second best hand on the river, you should absolutely call here. Definitely do not re-raise, but definitely make the call here. With a hand like pocket jacks here, you're going to have the best hand the vast majority of the time. All right, guys, moving on to tip number 4 now to tell if they have it or not. And let's talk about acting too quickly now. So this is something that fish do all of the time, especially against the flow of action. Now let me break that one down for you. Against the flow of action means that you raised before the flop, and now our fishy friend here is going to immediately bet into us on the flop. This is a very fishy, weird play that makes no sense, and that is why it is almost always recreational players who do this, and it almost always means a mediocre hand or a draw at best. And the simple reason why is because if they hit some sort of monster hand on the flop, we all know that they'd want to think about it. Often when somebody flops a straight 2-pair trips, for example, their eyes light up. Whoa, they checked their hand again. Did I really hit that? They're not going to just make a bet right away into you, because they're going to want to think about their hand a little bit. They're going to want to think about how they're going to get the most money out of you, for example. And usually what they're going to do is actually slow play. They're going to check on the flop instead. So guys, do not fall for this classic tell, often by amateurs and recreational players, of betting against the flow of the action into you quickly. It often means some sort of weak pair or a draw at best. This is a spot where I'm often calling or bluff raising them back, but let's let's talk about a situation now where they actually are strong. Moving on to tip number 3, and that is the river tank raise. Now guys, you need to look out for this one. This one is a sign of massive strength, especially if they give you the old Phil Hellmuth speech on the river about how they're sick and tired of you betting and raising them and they need to play the sheriff and make you honest. Guys, we've all seen this one before. If they wanted to play the sheriff and make you honest, they would just call. There's no reason for them to raise. When they raise, guys, they are sandbagging you with the nuts. The nuts means, by the way, one of the best hands possible or the best hand possible. This is a classic tell of weak poker players who think that their Oscar style speech and raise on the river somehow works. I guess it does work against a lot of weaker players. You as a savvy poker player watching a video like this knows better. Do not fall for this. When they go into their time bank on the river and then raise you, they are never bluffing. If you've only got one pair or less, fold your hand quickly and move on to the next hand. Alright guys, moving on to number 2 now. Let's talk about the special case of the fish on tilt. So in my first poker book, Crushing the Micro Stakes, I walked you through exactly how to put the fish on tilt, and spoiler alert, it's bluffing them, raising them a lot, over betting. I've talked about this in many videos here on the channel previously. So guys, you need to recognize when the fish is mad at you, they're frustrated at you because they're going to run all sorts of crazy bluffs against you on a board like an 8-8-5-3 king, for example. So if you have a hand like pocket tens here and you know you've got a fish on tilt, you know you've got a strong hand, you absolutely just want to call them down the entire way, let them make their big bluffs into you. Do not raise them, by the way, at any stage of the hand, because we have one of these hands here with pocket tens, which is an excellent bluff catcher, but does not want to get into a raise, re-raise war here, because if they actually do have a hand like an 8 here, for example, or they hit the king on the river, it's going to be bad news for us. So guys, when you've got the fish on tilt, you got them frustrated at you, take a hand like this and just call them down the whole way. That is the best way to get all their chips. All right guys, moving on to my number 1 way to tell if they have it or not, and this one's really simple. They've watched way too many Black Rain 79 poker videos. So guys, I'm going to tell you straight up, these people are almost always going to be bluffing you, especially when the ace of hearts falls on the turn. I have made way too many videos here on the channel talking about why you should be bluffing on this scare card. But guys, in all seriousness here, most players these days are relatively balanced, meaning that they don't give off too many egregious tells like we've talked about throughout this video. So if you find yourself at a poker table with a lot of strong players who don't give off too many of the common tells we've discussed in this video, my advice is always very simple. Leave that poker table. You want to be playing against the recreational players in particular who make large fundamental mistakes. Alright guys, like and subscribe if you found this one helpful, and if you want to know my entire strategy to beat your poker games, make sure you grab a copy of my free poker cheat sheet. That'll be the top link in the description below. Thanks a lot for watching guys, and we'll catch you next time.